The Second Industrial Revolution was marked by the introduction of electricity. It lasted from 1870 to 1914. There were major advances in technology made during this time period. The Bessemer process and the safety elevator made skyscrapers possible. In 1885, the first 10-story building was built, and in 1909, the first 50-story building was built. Brooklyn Bridge was also built. Time zones were introduced in 1884. The first telephone was sold in 1877. The newspaper industry developed. Mass transit began with electric power streetcars in 1888, and the first electronic subway in 1904. The first department stores were opened. New technology increased view time, and that resulted in a boom in popular entertainment. In 1884, the first roller coaster opened, and there was also vaudeville and later movie theaters. During the Second Industrial Revolution, the South fell behind the North because it was still recovering from the Civil War. It had limited public education and capital investment, even though the United States had almost as much railroad track as the rest of the world combined. The South only had two major railroad tracks, and railroad monopolies allowed the companies to charge as high as they wanted to. The South was mainly agricultural, and it was getting harder to make money as a farmer because increasing supply resulted in lower prices. And the boll weevil appeared in the South in the 1890s, which could destroy entire crops of cotton. Workers worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for low pay and harsh conditions where accidents were common. In the early 1900s, the U.S. had the highest rate of industrial accidents. In 1911, there was a fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist Company in New York City. 146 workers died because they were locked inside. Many workers lived in tenements with very poor safety conditions and frequent cholera outbreaks in dangerous cities with high crime rates and no police force. Because of the poor working conditions, labor unions began to form. Samuel Gompers started the American Federation of Labor, or AFL. The first major strike wasn't until 1877. It was the railroad industry in response to wage cuts. People were forced to work by federal troops. At Haymarket Square, there was a riot after a bomb killed a policeman, and the police fired into a crowd, killing dozens. Labor unions and anarchists were blamed for the riot. At the Pullman factory, Pullman laid off workers and cut wages on the rest, and a strike was called. The government brought out the army to respond to the Pullman strike. Immigration also changed during this time period. Previous immigrants were from the UK and Germany, were Protestant, and were skilled laborers. The new immigrants were mainly from Italy and Russia, were Catholic or Jewish, and were unskilled laborers. There was also some discrimination against Asian immigrants, who sometimes had to wait longer to enter the U.S., and there were even Chinese exclusion acts passed.